Hello, I'm Kate, and usually I talk about classical music. Well, all the time. I talk about classical music. So ever since I can remember, I've been able to sing. It was something that I've been doing from such a young age that it really became part of my identity. I started taking voice lessons when I was, I think 12 maybe. And then my family moved to Italy when I was 15. And I started taking lessons with an Italian opera teacher in Naples. And that's really when I decided that I wanted this to be my career. I went to a university for my undergrad and I did my master's at the Royal College of Music in London. And then after that, I went into opera, which is what I had my degree in. And it was fine. I did okay, but I didn't really like it all that much. So I decided to segue into choral music, which was really the thing that I had loved all along. And that went really well. That was my niche. I really cultivated this ability to float high notes. That was the thing that got me hired. I was on the path to having quite a successful career in that particular field. And then in October of 2019, it was all gone. A vocal hemorrhage leading to hemorrhaging polyp complications. So it happened really quickly. I was just singing like Mozart or something really not crazy. And I felt this little pop. It didn't hurt. It felt like a really small, thick rubber band had just snapped. But then without actually any pain from the snap itself, it was just a strange, for anyone who's a mom out there, it felt like my water broke, except then here in my throat. And then obviously with no water. That's gross. That's really gross. And for the first couple of minutes, I didn't really know what had happened. I kept singing, it didn't hurt, everything felt fine, so I just kind of kept going. But then within about 10 minutes, I couldn't phonate at all. I couldn't sing, I couldn't speak, I literally could not make any sound. So obviously I was completely freaking out. So I actually faked food poisoning so that I didn't have to tell my director what had happened. That's a whole different subject, but basically the silence around vocal injuries is really, really, really large. We can talk about that later. So I faked food poisoning, I went home, and then I slept on it a little bit, and the next morning I sounded like this. And I think the expression on my face is a really good indicator of how easily we can hide things that are really scary. I was really scared while I was filming that video, and the reason that I filmed it is because I wanted people to. It's so cringy, but it's also it's a good representation of where I was mentally at that point. I wanted to show that everything was okay, and I wanted to show myself that everything was okay by showing off a skill that I had never had before, as if I'd always had it and was just letting people know all of a sudden that, oh look, I can do whistle tone. I had never in my life been able to do whistle tone, ever. That does not happen overnight. That's a real indication that something is wrong. With time and with vocal therapy, I realized that things were never going to go back to how they had been. I thought everything was over. I thought I would never be hired again if I couldn't do this one very specific skill. So I took a 4-month hiatus from my contracts for mental health, although I did have quite some mental health issues. I was actually doing vocal therapy, but like I said, we don't talk about that in the industry because it's much more reputation damaging to have a vocal injury than it is to have mental health burnout, believe it or not. And this happened in October of 2019, right? So by the time I was supposed to come back, it was March of 2020. March of 2020. You know that scene in Inside Out? All the little islands that form her entire personality start collapsing. All the things that she had built her identity on just start falling apart. That was exactly how I felt. All of my contracts were gone. I felt like I couldn't sing anymore, at least certainly not to the level that I was used to. I was severely in debt, and to be very frank, my marriage had fallen apart. So I ran. like without a word, left all my friends, my family, everyone, and I moved to Europe. I felt like I started my life from scratch, like reset back to when I was 11. What if I decided that I wasn't going to pursue classical music? For the first time in my life, I had relationships that weren't based on classical music. I had friends who did not care if I could sing. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but like, honestly, that is what my life had been. Not only did I have friends who didn't care if I could sing, I had a lot of people in my life who didn't know that I could sing. They didn't know about my history as a classical musician, and they still liked me. So like, yeah, it was the first time in a really long time that I had relationships that weren't built on classical music, and I loved it. And I still really cherish those relationships now. And then after like 2 years of having this new life, I realized, holy shit, the injury that I had didn't happen out of nowhere. It wasn't like a boulder like landed on a leaf and then everything like sinks to the bottom of the river. It was more like someone was just I was just putting little pebbles on the leaf, and then every day it would sink a little bit until finally it just, there's one too many. Somewhere along the way, I tied my ability to sing to my actual inherent worth as a human being. That's not good. That's really not good. And I didn't know I did that, and I don't think anyone actively encouraged that. It's no one's fault, but it happened, and it took me a while to realize that. I think also a big one is the pressure of the reputation. There are some industries where your clout is really important. I had this idea that I had to prove that I had what it took to be at the top. So I was constantly trying to show that I deserved to be there. I took contracts I absolutely hated and did not want to do. A lot of them involved travel. So there was a point where I was on the road consistently. I didn't have a home base. And that's kind of the goal for a musician, that you just live on tour, basically. But instead of being with one ensemble, I was going from contract to contract. And that meant there was a lot of either driving or flying. So I was constantly traveling to cities where I didn't know anybody and I didn't know the area. I went to dinners with colleagues that I couldn't afford because they could, and I didn't want to look like I couldn't afford it, because why did they have more money than me? What, were they being more successful? And I couldn't let them see that they were more successful than me, which is ridiculous. And I don't know who ever told me I had to do this stuff, but I told myself. Obviously, all of these things took a huge toll on my mental health, and I've always been prone to anxiety, and I'd had a couple of panic attacks before then, but it was nothing like what I was experiencing at that particular year. I started doing therapy after the hemorrhage itself, but I wish that I had started before then, but I didn't. I try to be gentle with myself. I did not know then what I know now about mental health. On the night that my cord hemorrhaged, I was in a city that I had never been in before with colleagues that I had not really met or sung with before. I didn't know anyone. I didn't have any friends in the area. I was staying in a stranger's house, a nice house, but a stranger and not my house nonetheless. My relationship with my husband was very on the rocks at that point, and we were discussing divorce, and yeah, I don't know, like all just talking about all of this is like it's like I'm actively trying to release my shoulders. I completely understand why all the stress went to my throat. When I first got injured, I had always intended to go back to the career. I never thought I was ever going to walk away. But now I genuinely see that injury as like the universe just like throwing a giant bucket of ice water at my head, because every other thing that was happening to me was not enough to make me go, listen, like pay attention. Once all the stuff was gone, I didn't feel fear and shame. I felt, it sounds so corny, I'm so sorry, but honestly, I felt free. God, I felt free. I had this whole golden Wonka ticket given to me to just go out and just go do shit. I don't feel the need to have a title or a career or a role in an opera in a certain opera house in a certain city with a certain conductor, or the pedigree behind my institutions to feel like I deserve a place in the musical world anymore. And it's like really nice. I'm actually getting emotional. That's really nice. Whew, okay, I need to... And to be clear, I don't blame the industry for this. I mean, there's a lot of stuff I don't like about the industry that I'm now realizing as I'm coming out of this field, but I don't blame them for what my experience was. I was in it for the wrong reasons. And now that I know that, I can finally start to do the music I want to do because I want to do it. And that is so cool. It's so cool. So that's why I left. Because I love the life I have now. And I'm really happy. They're happy tears. They're not. Okay. Thank you to all of you for giving me a little bit of time over the last 6 weeks to handle some family stuff. Everything is fine. It's all good. I'm really grateful that I was able to do that. So thank you. As you may have noticed, this video was a little bit different. I've spent the last year or so on this channel trying to really working. I've put so much focus on trying to script and predict and analyze and assume what my audience wants to hear, that I haven't actually been pursuing the things that I'm personally interested in and that I want to talk about because I'm worried that it won't get the engagement. And I think now that that's probably not the right way to do things. And now I want to follow the stuff that I find interesting. It'll stay in the classical music realm, of course. I don't see that changing because that's still a huge part of my interest, even if it's not a huge part of my identity anymore. I'm also going to be going a little bit more into the unscripted things. I feel like I'm learning so much on the podcast with Rabin because that's a conversation. I can't script that stuff. So I have no choice but to be myself. I can't present this thing that I want people to see. It has to be me. So I'm going to start doing that here. And I know that's a skill and I know that takes time. So I'm going to take the time and build that skill. I am so incredibly grateful to everyone who watches and subscribes and follows along. I can't believe we hit the 1,000 subscriber point while I was with my family. That is amazing. I am very humbled. I am very honored. I am very scared. But mostly, honestly, mostly I'm very excited to just see where this goes. I want to know what I'm going to do in the future. And I don't know, that's the point. Anyways, thank you for coming along. I really appreciate it. And I will see you really soon. Bye.